if you feel uncomfortable or shame or guilt, it's good to just be curious. I love this idea, like instead of condemning ourselves for making mistakes, maybe I went the whole week and I didn't exercise, instead of saying, oh, I'm such a slob, I'm just back to my old ways. Instead of feeling that, just say, that's interesting. After I was making all this progress, why did I stop? And just because your body, your mind, these are just, it's telling you something. And if you're just curious instead of judgmental or filled with shame and self-loathing, that curiosity is such a much more compassionate way to see yourself. And it also will absolutely help you get to the bottom of why you're doing what you don't want to do, or not doing what you do want to do.
Welcome to Champions Mojo, a podcast to bring out your inner champion. Your hosts are sisters-in-law Kelly Pallas and Maria Parker. Kelly is a former Division I head swim coach, Olympic trials qualifier, and holds national and world records in masters swimming. Maria holds world records in endurance cycling and won the world's toughest bike race, Race Across America. Both are certified health and life coaches. Our goal is to inspire you through conversations with champions. And now, your host, Kelly Pallas.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Champions Mojo podcast, where today we'll be talking about self-sabotage. Why do we sometimes do the opposite of what we should? What is self-sabotage? How does it keep us from achieving our goals? And how do we recognize it and use it for positive change? If you've ever found yourself hitting the snooze button despite your intention to get up and work out, or going for that second piece of pie just when you've started to get traction on your weight loss goals, you'll want to stay with us. Hello, Maria. Are you ready to go after this topic?
Yes, Kelly. I've observed it myself, and I think you and I have talked about it too, and also in our health coaching clients, that, sometimes when we do well for a couple of weeks and progress towards our goals, it's followed by what seems an inexplicable backslide into our old bad habits. And I know this is a very common experience, and it's very discouraging. So I'm excited to talk about some of the reasons we can be our own worst enemy and how to recognize it and turn it into a stepping stone toward understanding ourselves and achieving lasting positive change. So let's get started.
Yeah. So Maria, how do we recognize self-sabotage?
Well, I think it's when you feel shame or anger at yourself for doing what you haven't, what you said, not doing what you said you would do, or doing what you said you wouldn't do. And, we use the example in the introduction of snooze button or second piece of pie. For me, even yesterday, I found myself after a stressful phone call, and I love a little dark chocolate with some, peanut butter on or something. That's a normal and healthy snack for me. But my little bit of dark chocolate turned into, a half a bar. And that isn't what I want to do. It's not how I want to eat. And I felt that sense of, this is so discouraging. Why am I doing this? And then I remembered this lesson on self-sabotage. So I think we can recognize it in ourselves when we find things going off the rails. For me, I can notice it when I feel shame. It's like, and shame is not a great feeling. And we'll talk about later how to turn that feeling around. But I think for me, that's how I recognize it. What about you, Kelly? Any ideas on that?
Yes, I can totally relate to, shame. And I think we've talked about this before. I believe, and we're going to talk about 3 very specific ways that self-sabotage can enter our lives. But I feel like at the top of the show here, it's important to say that we talk about becoming the type of person that always works out, or the type of person we change our identity as an athlete. In thinking about, maybe you're someone that is trying to lose weight or become athletic, but historically you've been an overweight person who's been maybe like I love your little story about being called a jelly bean.
Yeah.
So you might have seen yourself when you were younger as a jelly bean.
Yeah.
And then when you started to run 5Ks and you started to get a little more fit, maybe your mind thought, well, am I really an athlete or am I a jelly bean? And so I can tell, so my identity, so I am going to tell my little story, which I said before we started recording. I know our listeners probably get tired of me talking about my skin, but it is, it's such a big thing in my life. And it's hard for me to not scratch a lot of times. I think it's soothing. Scratching feels good. When maybe my skin is dry or I've swum in chlorine, even your husband, my brother, Jim, says he gets the chlorine itch. Oh, yeah. So you just start that little scratching. So I've told you, I can go all day without scratching because I'll be distracted and I won't. But then at the end of the day, if I'm just like you reward yourself with chocolate, I reward myself with scratching. And I feel shame, but I also have this identity right now as someone who has itchy skin. Mm-hmm. So that's my identity, as someone who has itchy skin versus someone who has smooth, calm skin. And when I might go through a couple of days of less calm skin, I just expect, oh, well, I'm just somebody who has itchy skin. In fact, I'm someone who has bad skin. I'm someone who has a skin problem. And that is my identity. And it's, and I think when I could start healing and maybe look at it as, well, my skin's itching because it's healing. Because if anybody's ever had a wound that heals, it itches. And so I think self-sabotage can be getting into a new identity where you're really working out or you're eating well or you're not doing a bad habit. You've made it, you've decided you're going to give up caffeine or you're going to give up alcohol or you're going to give up scratching or whatever your little bugaboo is. Then you are identified with that. And then when you become the non-scratcher or the person with calm skin or the person who doesn't drink alcohol or the person who doesn't eat extra desserts, then your mind snaps back to the other identity. So I think that is something that happens with self-sabotage. So
I love that. I think I think you've nailed it. I mean, we talk about how do you change your identity and we've learned that, there's your behaviors, there's your beliefs, and then there's your identity. And as we're changing, there's a part of our brain that is terrified.
Yes.
And for reasons that are not usually conscious to us, it's going, no, 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 no. In fact, I talked to a client. I just loved this super honest observation she gave me. She said, I'm losing weight and I look at all of my clothes, my beautiful, beautiful clothes. And I think to myself, pretty soon they're going to be too big for me. And I think I don't want that to happen, so I start eating again. Yeah, and I thought that was so beautiful and honest. And so there's a part of us that, we don't like change. We refer to it in health coaching as the critter brain or the reptilian brain or it's way down in there and it wants to keep things exactly the way they've been. And so I think when you start to change, that's when you particularly are open or are tempted by, are likely to fall into self-sabotage. So, I've been working on this kind of habit of eating to when I'm mad or in this case, when I'm stressed for a long time. And I've been making some really good progress towards it. And I think yesterday it was just like, nope, the critter brain was going, nope, we liked it the way it was when you fed yourself a whole chocolate bar when we were stressed. So.
Yes. Yeah. So I think, there are a lot of little techniques that we've talked about throughout our different episodes. I think one of them is, I love avatars, thinking of this.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
An avatar that's strong and has smooth skin or that, is impervious to the chocolate or impervious to
I love that. That's
desserts or
great,
whatever.
Kelly. Yeah, we can become our avatar. We can put our avatar out there and say, I am, going to be that. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on self-sabotage, but let's talk specifically about the 3 most common ways that we self-sabotage. Do you want to start with that first one, Maria?
Sure. So I think, and this is really a common thing, all of our lives are busy. And so we've started to exercise or whatever. And all of a sudden, we have a busy day or we get tired or whatever. And we say, well, I'm just going to hit the snooze button because my sleep's important, or, getting up this morning and preparing for my work meeting is more important right now. And so we tend to allow, when we're first starting on a new goal, we're highly motivated and we set these things into place. But then after we've been doing it for a while, we forget where we're going, and we allow our health goals and our desire to become this new person, to become this new identity, to slip. And so for me, a story about that is, I know that in order to eat healthfully, I have to do food prep. There's just no way I can spontaneously, we've talked about this in other episodes, like food doesn't, unfortunately, healthy food does not magically appear on my countertop at 4:00 when I start to get hungry. And so, I can sort of get through breakfast and lunch, not too hard, but dinner is never going to happen spontaneously, healthfully. And so I have to do food prep. And so I started that, and then, it's just, but everything else seems more important than that. And eventually I forget that my own health and the health of my family, the people that I cook for, is much more important than anything. Because, if you haven't got your health, you haven't got anything. This is really, really important. Food prep is always going to be part of my life, and I need to just make sure that it's a top priority. So I think the first scenario is something else is more important than you and your health. And it's remembering that, you're remembering why your health is important and what you have to do to continue to make that your first priority.
Yes. And I think with our busy lives and also with loved ones in our life, that we can sometimes think that they're a priority. If you're a young mother and you've said you're going to work out every day, but your child needs something, you're going to prioritize that. And of course, there are going to be times when you have to, if, it's an emergency with your child. But in general, it's putting yourself first. It's self-care, and not thinking, like you said, like that work is more important, or that your spouse is more important, or, something else is more important. So I love number 1. I think that's a really good recognizing that you're very important and that you got to focus on that.
Right. You can't forget that. Yeah. Okay. That's great.
Number 2, the way that we sometimes commonly self-sabotage is that we want to fit in. I'm thinking of a client that I'm working with right now, which she's awesome, and she's young. She's a junior in college. She wants to eat healthier and exercise more, which is a great goals that she has for this 90-day transformation that we're working with her on. And so the number 2 self-sabotage is desiring acceptance. So she's said she's afraid that when she goes back to college, that her roommates, she lives in a apartment with multiple people, that they aren't going to, want to eat healthy, and they're not going to be supportive of her going out for a run or doing her exercise, and that she worries that she might just fall in with the ranks and be doing, not doing her routine that she's been doing all summer because she desires acceptance. And I think that's a common thing, that you just kind of, you want to fit in, and then there's the example of, let's say you're not eating a lot of carbs, and you go to your favorite aunt or your favorite grandmother or somebody for dinner, and they serve, mashed potatoes and pasta or something for dinner.
Right.
So you don't want to hurt your aunt or your grandmother's feelings, and you just go ahead and your diet goes to heck because you eat a whole dinner of carbs. Desiring acceptance is one way that we self-sabotage. And, that kind of ties into number one, because you're pleasing other people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I think one of the things to remember is that, our basic, the very, 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 very most important basic need is love, safety, and three needs: love, safety, and belonging. And if you're doing something different than everybody else, I think there's a real fear that you're going to lose love and you're not going to, feel like you belong. And so, I think the thing you have to ask yourself is, is that true? Like, is that really true? Like I had to go through this kind of when I sort of changed my eating. I have a relative who just loves to feed me carbs and and gets great joy and pleasure out of that. And so I had a lot of fear around losing that person's, love and affection. But it turns out that person really wanted to just love me, and she was willing to fix, lower carb foods to make me happy. So it wasn't true, that if that I had to eat this diet that wasn't working for me around that person to have her love. And so I think that's one of the things we have to ask ourselves: is it true? Is it, if I, and really lots of times when you are eating well or exercising, it will inspire other people. And if it doesn't inspire other people, it's often because they're afraid that, you're going to somehow, leave them or be, that they won't be part of your group. So, there's a lot of deep fears around this acceptance thing. But I think the big thing is to sort of talk about it and get it out of your critter brain and into your sort of frontal lobe. Like, will this, really, will somebody stop loving me because I don't, drink with them on Friday nights or if I just do one drink instead of, getting really, really, really drunk. So I think we have to ask ourselves. So yeah, that desiring acceptance is so important. And if you realize, hey, I'm doing this because I really want to be accepted by this group, that's really helpful just to acknowledge it and then get it out there and then ask yourself, is it really true? And if it is, do you really, you might want to question the kind of people that you're hanging out with. If you're an alcoholic and all your friends are alcoholics, you may have to be changing your group. So
yeah, or any bad habit that's enforced in a group. And those three things that we do need: love, safety, and belonging. I'm big on safety. I love safety and safety in numbers and safety in what we're doing. And so I think we can use again a little kind of technique of saying we can thank our past selves for keeping us safe.
Yes.
And then move to our new self, that we can still be safe and are like, just ask the question, am I really not going to have safety if I move into this new adventure, this new behavior, this new healthier time? And maybe, like my husband always, whenever I try to go out for a walk or a run by myself, and usually he's with me, but by myself, sometimes I'll do it. He's had some major plantar fasciitis over the last year with his own injury. So he's not been running as much with me. And so, but he always says, be careful. I worry about you running by yourself. I hope it's safe, so he plays on my safety feature.
Yes,
but,
yes.
I think, and I never even think about that. But,
right.
If you're somebody who's generally stayed inside and you're afraid of it, you're probably going to be safe. So you just have to say, I'm going to be safe with my new routine as well as my old.
That's good. I think that's good. Just recognizing, wait, this is a need I have for safety, and somebody, and how is this? I think a great example is people who may have had bad sexual experiences in the past, and they pack on the weight because if they feel like if they're covered with a nice, thick layer of adipose tissue, they won't ever have to have a bad sexual experience again. In some level, that's really, really true. It keeps you safe. It keeps you, and so, but getting that, that's a big one, but getting to it, like how has how have my habits or my body, how has it kept me safe? Has it kept me belonging? If all of your friends are, are athletes, you're going to tend to be an athlete. And if all of your friends love to sit around and eat, like in college for me, I would almost every night have a whole pint of ice cream with a king size bag of M&Ms on top. Fortunately I had a great metabolism, but my gosh, but that's what everybody else was doing. And I just, that was part of I loved it. It was delicious, but it was also part of belonging. And, and I at that time, my social group was very fluid. I could have easily chosen a group of people who read Shakespeare at 8:00 at night. So,
yes.
So I think it's really important to realize what's going on around there. Okay. And the third self-sabotage
Maria, wait, before I wanted to, talk a little bit about that one thing that you talked about is what are you getting out of your self-sabotage or your bad habits? I think that's so valuable. And I know for the longest time in my family, when I've had eczema on my hands, which is really the main place that I've had eczema in my whole life is on my hands, always my hands, that I got to get out of doing the dishes. It was like, And that as my beautiful sister-in-law who's served up so many meals, like it's kind of traditional that whoever cooks, the other people clean up. So I didn't cook. I'm not a cook. And then when it came time to clean up, it was just like, oh, my hands are just raw. I cannot, clean up dishes and put them in dishwater. And so everybody was always, oh, of course not, Kelly. No, don't touch those dishes. And that was the way, I've had eczema on my hands since I was like 7 years old. So my mother was very adamant, when I was growing up that I did not do any dishes because she didn't want my hands to be worse. So, hey, that serves me. So what are you getting out of,
that is so great. That's a great story. Yeah. And there's always something good about, even a bad habit. And, I think the other side of that is who in your circle is going to be negatively affected if you achieve your goals. And I think that's something to really think about. If you're married and, you and your husband have built, I remember we had this couple that we were friends with and they moved to Alaska and they just started cooking together and loving it. And they got so overweight. And they said, what did they say? Your body's not a temple. It's a playground. They just really got into it. But, if they had, one of them had decided, look, this is enough, then, that would have negatively impacted their hobby together of eating and cooking and eating together. So I think lots of times you have to think about who might be hurt. If I get healthy, who's going to be hurt? And that's a serious question. Some people are going to be bothered by it or hurt by it, or there's going to be a loss. So, I think acknowledging that helps you also recognize sabotage when it comes its way. It will, move it from the unconscious to the conscious.
Yes. Okay. I just wanted to comment on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, that
was
a
3.
Really excellent point. So the third major self-sabotage is, I've been so good. I deserve to take this day off of exercise, or I deserve to have this, bowl of ice cream. I've been good. It's a reward. And I think, all of us can relate to this. I've been, so steady and it's not that reward is a bad thing. And even having a day a week where, you just let yourself relax and you relax the rules around eating, you relax, the rules around exercise. That's not a bad thing because but if you do it consciously, if you're doing it unconsciously, it's like, and that was essentially what was happening to me yesterday. Is like I'd had this stressful phone conversation and then I was like, I got to reward myself because that was so awful.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of like I've been good and, or this bad thing has happened. I deserve this. You deserve this. And so when you find yourself thinking I deserve this, ask yourself, do you deserve this? And I think one of the things that I've learned through health coaching is if you feel uncomfortable or shame or guilt, it's good to just just be curious. And I love this idea, like instead of condemning ourselves for making mistakes, maybe I went the whole week and I didn't exercise, instead of saying, oh, I'm such a slob, I'm just back to my old ways. Instead of feeling that, just say, that's interesting. Why did, after I was making all this progress, why did I stop? And just because your body, your mind, these are just, it's telling you something. And if you're just curious instead of judgmental or filled with shame and self-loathing, that curiosity is such a much more compassionate way to see yourself. And it also will absolutely help you get to the bottom of why you're doing what you don't want to do, or not doing what you do want to do.
Yes, I think self-compassion is really important. And it's, we can be there for a friend, and be loving and supportive. And yet when you turn it on, at least for me, when I turn it on myself, I've said this before, that it's like, oh, I'm so judgmental and I'm so tough on myself. But one of the things that I work with clients on, this specific number on, that you reward yourself, that you're doing so well, and you reward yourself in a bad way. And I think if we can have a reward system in place where we reward ourselves, instead of with a whole chocolate bar or a scratch fest or whatever, we reward ourselves with something called the personal nourishment menu. And I love the idea of a personal nourishment menu to replace bad rewards. And some easy, just off the top of my head, nourishment menus that are available for us, playing your favorite song and really enjoying a dance by yourself to your favorite song, or getting a massage, or buying yourself fresh cut flowers. I mean, the smallest thing. I had talked about this with a client the other day, and she said, oh my gosh, I love fresh cut flowers. And every time I go through the grocery store, I walk through that floral section and I think, oh my gosh, look, that would look so beautiful on my table. But she says, I never buy them. And I'm like, so reward yourself with something like that, or a good deep conversation with a friend, or a nice tub bath, or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Like have your list ready of what really nourishes your soul, so you don't slip into a bad reward when you can have good rewards.
Right. Oh, that's such a great point. And I mean, I think we could do a whole section on this, but I have worked long and hard on I call it Joy Jolt list. Sitting in a rocking chair, lighting a candle, as you said, listening to music, fresh cut flowers, a clean kitchen. Believe it or not, a clean kitchen is very joyful for me. I'd love to reward myself with a clean kitchen by just, getting it done. So, there's a lot. If you think about what makes me feel good, a hug from my husband, dancing, beautiful music. There's so many, but if you keep a list around, it's like instead of digging into the candy bar drawer, you're digging into, the things that really do nourish your soul.
Yes, yes. Well, Maria, that is, I think, a great place to end. We just need to, be kind and gentle and loving, and self-sabotage is things that we're doing to ourselves. So just a quick review. Have the identity of where you're going. Pick that identity out and really own it. Keep your goal as the most important thing. Don't let something else be more important. Don't get caught in trying to please others, that you're desiring acceptance. And then the last one is, reward yourself, but in a good way.
Yeah, I love that. And I especially love this idea, and I hope people will take it home, is if you start to feel shame or guilt, change that to curiosity and compassion. Yeah, what happened there? What is my body, my mind trying to tell me? I love that. Because remember, it happens, self-sabotage happens when part of you wants to move forward and the other part is saying, oh, no, I'm much more comfortable here. So it's great to just be kind to yourself.
Yes. Well, we don't do our takeaways on our own little topics usually. I'm just going to try to, be aware of these as I move forward with different goals in my life. And how about you, Maria? What are your
same
thoughts?
Just always when I feel guilt or self-condemnation, especially to be curious and think about, how is this, habit that I don't want serving me in other ways, and then figure out, ways to counter that.
Wonderful. Let's jump into our rest of our day here as self-loving instead of self-sabotage.
Yeah, I love it. All right, Kelly, thanks so much. I love you.
Thank you. Love you too, Maria.
Bye-bye.
This week's quote of the week is from Alice Cornan Selby. Self-sabotage is when we say we want something and then go about making sure it doesn't happen.
You've been listening to the Champions Mojo podcast with host Kelly Palace and Maria Parker. Champions Mojo is produced by Cabra Media, and a new episode debuts every Tuesday. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. Follow Champions Mojo on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook @Champions Mojo.